A quick heads up that this Saturday, November 9th, from 10 to 1 at Techtown, we are doing a studio open house. A number of our listeners asked if we would do a weekend get-together, so we're doing it. Coffee, breakfast treats, all of that. 10 to 1 at Techtown. Come check out the studio. Link on Eventbrite and in our show notes. Here we go, friends. This is our last episode of Daily Detroit before Election Day. I am Jer Stays. It is Monday, November 4th, 2024. And joining me is the excellent Steve Freese. If you are new here, Steve is a freelance journalist for the New York Times, Newsweek, and many others, and writes the weekly newsletter for the Ann Arbor Observer. Steve, I got to tell you, I am recording this with a Verner's in my hand because Verner's zero sugar, because I need something to settle my whole vibe and my whole feelings because the day is almost here.
You know, I don't need that kind of comfort. I think maybe some of the more recent polling, even though I don't believe in the polling, but it has been a little bit less bleak. There's just a sense I have that I think she's going to win. And it's almost like the fact that the Republicans are running around already making up stuff about fake election problems, that it makes me think they know it too. The thing that I don't get about them is that they run around telling everybody that the election is going to be stolen, that your votes aren't going to be counted, and then they expect people to go out and vote for them. Why would I if I if I didn't believe it was gonna matter? I don't understand the motivational idea. I get it sort of after the fact, I suppose, because that's what they do now.
That works with their core base, but when you're talking about trying to hit the undecided voter or people who are kind of the never Trumper Republicans, that is not the message that's going to work. And the thing is, in this media environment, people are going to hear all of those messages, It doesn't make any sense.
Look, I was out to breakfast with my kids and my husband today, and he asked me what I thought was going to happen, and I didn't even hesitate to say I think she's going to win. And he's like, "Really? You're that confident?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have that much faith, just enough faith in enough of my fellow Americans. It doesn't mean I'm not dismayed by what other people are voting for in terms of the efforts to undermine very basic concepts of our country. But I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be I'm going to say this, and boy, am I going to regret it if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be the election night we thought 2016 would be.
I am inclined to mostly agree with you. Let's go out on a limb together, but I do want to walk through some of the thinking that I have, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong, that kind of supports some of this stuff. Now, before we recorded this, we got news, and I'm not trying to put all of my stock in this poll, but this was the little piece of information that made me feel just enough better to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to stand on my business, and I'm going to go with that I believe that Harris is going to win, and I'm going to let my gut rule me with this one. And this poll from Iowa shows a swing of a lot of points from Trump to Harris, and it's based, looking under the hood. I listened to an interviewer on the Bulwark from the pollster. Now, the pollster is J. Ann Seltzer, and it's the Des Moines Register. It's a very well-known, well-respected poll, and I'm not putting all of my chips on that poll is right, but the indications underneath it that women have truly switched over to Harris. And all along, listeners of this podcast will know that my fundamental argument of the case, and I think to an extent yours as well, is if Harris can win the majority of women, she's got a real fighting chance at this thing. And this poll showed a much bigger swing. Now, I don't think that Harris is going to win Iowa per se. That poll put her up 3 points, but that showed me an indication that there is an energy going on in that direction in that state. And there it was because she said that there was an abortion ban put into place and people really don't like it now that it's actually there. There's a real big kickback against that. And lo and behold, it's exactly along the lines of what many things that Steve Freese said.
You know, it's interesting interesting because we said this back when Donald Trump gave his speech, or maybe it was the debate, whatever it was. But he keeps on saying that everybody wanted this, that everybody wanted Roe v. Wade to be overturned. And the problem with that statement is that he is lying not about esoteric things, but he's lying about the opinion and intent of the voters, and in some cases, his own voters, who may have been supporting him for many other reasons, but they were not happy. Particularly women were not happy about the fall of Roe and what has happened to the country since then. And so when you lie to the voters about themselves, it's much more personal. It's much more insulting. And it maybe opens a few people's eyes to how he lies about everything else.
I have a secondary case I would like to make to stand on the idea that Harris especially will take Michigan. And I want to get your ideas on this, is that Gretchen Whitmer just 2 years ago basically obliterated Tudor Dixon off of the political map, a devoted Trumpist, by more than 10 points. We have a woman Democratic Secretary of State. We have a woman Democratic Attorney General. The polling so far, and we'll get into a little bit of this in the show later, shows really strong for a woman Democrat in Elissa Slotkin. It is really hard for me to believe that in 2 years that big energy, some might call it big Gretch energy, others might call it a feminine nomenon. I don't see that erasing in 2 years. I don't see it being 10 points, obviously, but it is really hard as somebody who talks to a lot of people and is out in the real world, actually talking to individuals, not just looking at the funhouse mirror, this social media, or the YouTube comment section. It is really hard for me to believe that all of that energy is erased in 2 years.
You're absolutely right. And to my mind, the pure indication that this state is really pretty blue, actually, is that Dana Nessel won re-election. That she won election in the first place is amazing. But that she won re-election 2 years ago is just incredible. Because that means that there are enough Democrats and Republicans willing to vote for a Democrat, even if they are clearly a serious lifelong lefty. Jocelyn Benson is very corporate. She doesn't really come across that way. Gretchen Whitmer has made a tremendous amount of success in putting herself in the mainstream. But Dana Nessel came out of the gay civil rights movement. She's one of the reasons why gay marriage is legal in this country, and a pretty significant one. So it just amazes me that somebody with that kind of background can get a majority of the vote twice in the state. And then you're going to tell me that Kamala Harris can't? Really?
It defies logic if you've been in the state. And I think this gets me to another thought I've had around the national coverage of this thing, and people, whether it's on social media, on threads, whether it's you look at the people by the big board in the polls. And, I love the Steve Kornackis of the world as much as anybody. He is a nerd icon in so many ways. But I think that all of the focus on the Arab American communities, and I wonder if you agree with me, and maybe we can extrapolate that a little bit, the Arab American, the Muslim communities, and all of the side stories, I think they're all missing the forest for the trees. I think they're great for television, but I don't think it's going to be what breaks it for multiple reasons. Thoughts?
I'm exhausted with the people like Harry Enten and Steve Kornacki, and I cannot listen to them 1 minute longer. I put Dan Pfeiffer from Pod Save America into that group too. All these people who get these polls and have to come up with different permutations of explanations of how this could go or that could go. All of that said, I would have agreed with them a week ago. And I mean, we talked about this on the show many times now. I did think that the Muslim vote was going to be more significant and influential. What I did not expect, and what I do not know the consequence of, is that the Muslim vote would be so small. And what I mean, not just by in terms of raw numbers, but just the percentages are horrible in Hamtramck, Dearborn, and Dearborn Heights, at least through Saturday, at least through, which is the most recent data available as we're recording. We're talking about maybe around 20%
A voter
have voted
turnout.
voter turnout have voted early in those cities, and the statewide average is double that, is 41%. And as I've told you, Ann Arbor Township is over 60 something percent. Now, Ann Arbor Township is small and very rich, so I mean, I'm not surprised really, but Ann Arbor itself is well over 50%, maybe 55% already voted. And it is hard to imagine that there is some big energy in these cities, Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck, that is committed to just showing up on election day. Like, there isn't any reason to believe that if a community is not interested in voting early or via absentee ballot, that they're suddenly going to show up in big numbers on election day. That's just hard to believe. In fact, it's the opposite, because the whole purpose of early voting and absentee balloting was to make it easier for people, particularly working people, particularly people who don't have a lot of money, who can't drive, a lot of reasons why that was supposed to be the point, right? And so they're not voting. They're just not coming out to vote. And I'm not sure why, and I don't know what it means for either candidate. Do you have a thought about what it means?
I do.
Because I don't know.
I do. And this is just from talking to people. I live next to Hamtramck, man. Like, I can walk there from here. I have friends there. I have people involved in.
Okay, Sarah Palin.
I can see Hamtramck from here.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And also in Dearborn, in the past, I've actually worked at a number, on a number of stories. Listeners of the show will know that, we have a co-host who lives in Dearborn. What people are missing is that it's not that people are energized to go vote for Trump. What they feel is they feel disillusioned with the whole system. And so they're not going to go vote for Trump. There will be some, of course, but they're not going to en masse go for Trump. What they're going to do is sit out. And that is the vibe I have heard for a long time, where they're just going to sit out. They're just not going to be a part of this thing, because to them, especially if some of the issues when you're talking about Palestine and Gaza and not being heard at the DNC, it's like, well, that guy's not going to really help me out. But also, I don't trust the Democratic Party to help me out. Why am I here? What am I doing? That is a deeply held belief among some. And then I also want to respond to something I see online all the time, because we'll post things on Threads or whatever, and there will be this overwhelming wash of people being like, if they get Trump, they deserve it. I want to dispel all that. That's pretty gross, number one, because it's a very complicated situation. And it's, there's a lot of like deep-seated issues here going on. But also, a no vote is not factually a vote for Trump. It actually reduces your universe of total votes, and it is not a vote in the affirmative for the other guy. It is just factually incorrect because it affects the numbers in important ways.
The data is so bleak in terms of the turnout in those cities that it really has made me rethink what I wondered about, which is why they haven't addressed this more. I don't know if they really figured on these people just staying home as opposed to them voting against them. I don't know, but it is shocking. I mean, I see the numbers coming up a bit in Detroit. I think that they'll probably finish around 35 or so percent before election day in Detroit. That's fine. I guess that generally speaking, Detroit votes at about a 52, 53, 54%.
And it can plausibly hit with day of votes. That can be very plausibly hit from where they're at.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Kamala Harris was in Detroit today, and we're sort of trying to juice I assume there was a big Souls to the Polls day today. I'm sure that there were a lot of churches that were bringing their people to the church, and that has become such a tradition that it's entirely reasonable to think that an awful lot of people just were waiting until today to do it as a sort of a community activity. So we'll see. But no, I don't see very many good signs in the early voting data for Donald Trump. I see the areas that we know to be very blue voting in exceedingly high numbers. Washtenaw County is well over 50% already, the entire county. That's where Ann Arbor is.
Oakland County is showing up, especially southern Oakland County.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, of course. And, you can't really count on what's going on in the rest of the state. But here's the thing that I said before, and I believe and fits very, very neatly into the polling data that you were talking about earlier from Iowa, which is that I do believe that there are a lot of women in this state who are disgusted by Donald Trump, probably bored with their husband's idolatry of him, who just go along with it because what's the point of arguing with a dum-dum? And their own husbands, that is, who are very concerned about reproductive rights. I think that when all is said and done, if she wins, and if she wins by more than a few points, one of the reasons is going to be, and we can see some of this in the data, if the margins are a little bit narrower out in the smaller rural counties around the state. If it's typically a 70-30 split for Republicans, if it comes in 65-35 or something like that, we could see that. And that shift is enough in the state. It's enough to really help her and move this along. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if the ratio of male voters for Trump, is exceeded by the ratio of women voters for Harris, then it's going to be a good night for Harris. Vice versa, we're wrong, Steve. And, Trump wins Michigan. I feel like that's where it rests because that universe of total voters. So I'm looking at the 21% turnout in Hamtramck. That's literally less than 2,800 votes.
Yeah.
In Dearborn, we're talking, so you got almost 9,700 absentee ballots and a little under 6,000 early votes. So, 16,000 votes. Like, yes, it can matter in a really close election. And I know everybody looks at the last election being really close, but each time plays out different. I feel like sometimes, whether it's polling or predictions, we get caught in what happened, especially the one just before us, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, except I can't even wrap my head around what happened in 2020 because the year was so bonkers. The pandemic and the crash of the economy, and just all of it, even the Black Lives Matter stuff, to the point that I don't know how anybody could ever compare another election to what happened that year. It was just too off the wall. So I don't know. I think that we can compare this year. I think a little bit easier to 2016, but for the fact that we have 8 years now of this man on the news and in our feeds and in our brains saying these ridiculous, mean, awful things all the time. And I find it hard to believe that so many people want to deal with that every day for the next 4 years. But we could see. I will say this about the Gaza thing to kind of tie it up. Kamala Harris came to Ann Arbor last Monday, and she had a line or two in there about Gaza. It was part of the talk. But she was also appearing not on the campus of University of Michigan, but in Burns Park, which is out, it's close, and there were probably many, many students there, but it wasn't like on the campus. Tonight, as we're recording it Sunday, she spoke in the, I believe it's the basketball arena at MSU on campus. So this was not a mixed crowd. I mean, it probably was a mixed crowd, but it had to be dominated by students. It was on the campus. And in this case, she opened the speech. The first thing she said, she spoke for a few minutes about Gaza and about how bad everything is there and what needs to be done in Lebanon and Israel and this. I mean, I'd never heard her talk about it that much, ever, under any circumstance. And here it is, 2 days before the election, and she's on a college campus in Michigan, and she's acknowledging the, Arab American vote, and she's trying to sort of diffuse this question before she gets going on her speech. And I think that the only explanation for that is not necessarily that she thinks she's going to win back some of that support she's lost, but that she just didn't want to have the Gaza protesters interrupting her every 5 minutes while she spoke.
AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was doing Get Out the Vote with Debbie Dingell over there in Ann Arbor in your neck of the woods. And that AOC doesn't show up unless she feels aligned. I'm just going to say that. Like, she doesn't show up unless it makes sense or, you know, she's needed. And she did. Her involvement in things, you know, I'm even seeing the types of comments from the Bernie Sanders of the world, or even I get some stuff from listeners from like some radicals and reactionaries who are saying we need to go vote for Harris because Harris we can talk with, we can move her closer to our position. Donald Trump is going to throw us in jail. And like, that is the kind of energy that you're seeing in the close here, where a lot of the things that were like really loud before, it's like, okay, we all know this is a problem, but for now we need to realign ourselves a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be exciting to see what the final numbers are on those particular voters, but I do think that she's anticipating the pro-Gaza rabble to come up during her talk and decided today, of all days, that she was going to offer a lengthier and more substantive response to it.
Honestly, a pretty sane one. Like, very much into security for Israel, but also security and freedom of determination for Palestine.
Well, it's exactly what I was, I think I dictated what I would have her say a few weeks ago. I stand by it. It was never a difficult thing to argue. It's just she just chose not to for one reason or another. And one reason could very well be that she knows things. She's the vice president of the United States. In addition to being a candidate, she knows things. She knows that there's negotiation going on that she doesn't want to get in the middle of. She can't contradict or make any specific discussions of what she might do differently when she's still the number two to the president of the United States, whose job it is to deal with these things. So, I can see that. I guess I can see why, in retrospect, it turned out maybe not to be as bad a political decision as I thought it was. We'll see.
Now, I do want to touch on this U.S. Senate race. It's important. Elissa Slotkin, Mike Rogers, the most recent poll that I can find. This is in a Detroit news story. What goes ahead and puts this as a 46.2 to 42.5% race with Slotkin in the lead. The poll itself's got a error of 4 percentage points. They say that a little over 6.5% were undecided and 5% backing third-party candidates. It's interesting to see Slotkin work really hard. She's all over. She, in fact, was in Detroit today. She was with Harris at the church. She stopped by the Detroit Shipping Company, picked up some lunch. Like, she was all over Detroit today, kind of hustling that out. I'm interested to see where this goes because the control of the Senate and the House are really important. How all of these national races play and all this local stuff matters. I think that she is in a pretty good position to win this. Do you think? Or am I wrong?
It's hers to lose.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how she loses it. She is a mainstream candidate who has proven her ability to win over Republican voters in a swing district in the state. Her opponent hasn't really made much of an argument against her. There isn't much there.
I get a lot of ads about her being dangerous for auto jobs. Like, I get inundated with those ads every day, like 15 times a day. That's a case he's been making, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and we hear this a lot on the right and in the media that there's some schism going on over electric vehicles. But the fact of the matter is that the electric vehicles will also be made here. I mean, some parts are going to have to come from other places because of their components, but I don't get it. I don't get why that's the thing, and I especially don't get how that's the thing from the side that is proudly supported by Elon Musk. I mean, the cognitive dissonance is bizarre to me that, pushing electric vehicles somehow anti-American. I don't get it. So I just don't think it was a particularly persuasive argument. The only people who would have cared about it were probably union workers, and most of them are pretty dyed-in-the-wool Democrats in this state. And when you stack up, there might be some electric vehicles against Donald Trump laughing about Elon Musk firing people rather than collectively bargaining with them. Whose argument is going to win out in that case? I don't understand that, but mostly, she's a very good candidate. She's a very good candidate in a mold of her mentors, Debbie Stabenow. It's a lot of continuity there. I just don't see how she loses. I particularly don't see how she loses when we're so confident that Kamala Harris is going to win. I expect that Elissa Slotkin will run ahead of Kamala Harris, and probably by a couple of points, because, among other things, there are no third parties to pull any votes away in the Senate race. But, I think that Kamala Harris will win the state by 3, maybe 4 points. I do. I think that. And I think that Elissa Slotkin will come out 6, 7, 8 points ahead.
When do you think we will know how things have shaken out?
My expectation is we'll know about Michigan pretty readily, given all of the early voting and the fact that everybody is prepared to tabulate and spit out results pretty fast. But I will say that I hope everybody has voted or will vote. And if you happen to be a voter in the first precinct of Superior Township, Michigan, the one in Washtenaw County, not Chippewa County, there too, and you're going to vote on Election Day, I will be there at the Dixboro, Unitarian Church or something like that, working the polls. So say hello.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate you, Steve Freese, so very much. This has been quite the election season, and I'm looking forward to unpacking with you. I'm sure we're going to be doing some different episodes of different kinds throughout this week. I'll just tell you, listeners, the news will lead us as far as what we end up airing, and we're just going to kind of go with that. So with that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we will talk tomorrow.